Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Judges chapter 8. We're going to be continuing in verse 33. Actually, we're going to be finishing chapter 8 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, we left off last lesson with Gideon, his life and his death. And also we see Abimelech, his mother, that they were in Shechem and that she's a concubine. And that's where we left off last lesson. Gideon now is dead. Now let's read verses 33 to 35. And it says here, And it came to pass that as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Baalim, and made Baal Bereth their god. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side. Neither showed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had showed unto Israel. So Gideon dies, and what happens? It says here in verse 33 that as soon as, what does it say? It says as soon as, which means that their sinful, adulterous, and idolatrous hearts were quick to return to Baal. And all that was needed was the restraint of a representative to God to be removed. Even after 40 years, see how quick they return to Baal. But what is interesting is that the Baal that they worship was a Baal that had its origin in Shechem, where Gideon's concubine lived and where Abimelech also lived. It was called Baal Bereth, which means Lord of the Covenant. Now, it is not known if this Baal required a covenant from its worshipers, or if the worshipers made their own covenant to be faithful to Baal and to all those who also worshipped him, or possibly if this Baal was a god and a judge over all covenants that people made. Again, when it says here, Lord of the Covenant, it's not, we don't know exactly what that means. Now, but as the God of Israel was known as a God who made a covenant and is known as a covenant-keeping God, so also the enemy mimics God, what God does. God made a covenant with his people, and he's known as the covenant-keeping God. So also Satan comes up with a false god, an idol, Baal Bereth, the God of the covenant. And this is his imitation of God. Now, in verses 34 and 35, when the children of Israel take the first opportunity to return to Baal, the reality of what was in their hearts is now expressed. So here they've had rest for 40 years. Gideon is judging them, and now Gideon dies, and as soon as he dies, very shortly after that, what's in their heart, the harboring of their desire to worship Baal, now is able to be expressed. There's nothing stopping it from coming out, and it comes out, and they start to worship Baal. But other things also take place, and that is this: they forget the Lord who delivered them out of their enemies' hands. He delivered them into their enemies' hands because of idolatry. Then God delivered them out of their enemies' hands because they cried unto the Lord. They forgot God because they never really wanted to worship God in the first place. A selfish heart of ingratitude will only remember God when they really need Him. All that God had done to them and for them were now conveniently lost in their minds. What had God done to them? He delivered them into the hands of an oppressor. The Midianites, the Amalekites, and the Mesopotamians, right? God delivered them. This is what God did to them because they worshiped idols. What did God do for them? Well, when they cried unto the Lord, God delivered them. But now that Gideon is dead, they completely forget about what God did to them and why, and what God did for them and why. But their ingratitude to God, whom they cannot see, even was shown towards Gideon and his family, who they could see. They were ungrateful to the one who was a living testimony that Baal can't even defend his own altar and is therefore not worthy to be worshipped. Remember back in chapter 6? Yeah, chapter 6 verse 32 says, "Therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal plead against him, because he has thrown down his altar." So the name Jerubbaal, which Gideon bore, was a name that basically says, let Baal defend his own altar. Gideon tears it down. And if Baal has a problem with that, let Baal deal with it. Well, the fact that Gideon was still alive showed he was a testimony that Baal is not a real God. He's not worthy of worship. They were ungrateful to the one who was a living testimony unto them. And they were ungrateful to the one who had led them out of 7 years of oppression, something which Baal neither could do nor would do. The blindness and the stubbornness of their human heart to worship the God of creation in all things is probably the greatest evil that mankind can do. God delivered them into their enemies' hands because they worshiped idols. Then he delivered them out. And as soon as they had an opportunity, they were ungrateful to God. They went right back to Baal. Inside of each of us is the desire to establish only ourselves on the throne of our heart. We want to be our own God, making our own decisions and having the world revolve around us. We want to wipe out any remembrance of God or anyone who represents God. And this is exactly what they're doing. The unsaved heart, that's what they want to do. It's in our sinful nature to wipe out anything that reminds us of God. But what we really need is a good dose of human frailty to present itself to us so that we will cry out to God. Human frailty will lead to humility. Now, the children of Israel easily forgot about God, and they forgot about Gideon because they had every intention of regaining the throne of their hearts when the oppression was over. That's what this is about. It's not, in a sense, it's not about Baal. It's about their own wickedness in their own hearts. And when Gideon died, when the representative of God died, then they all of a sudden began to take up their own way of living their life how they wanted to. They wanted to become king of their own life. They didn't want God or anybody else telling them what to do. They wanted to make their own decisions. And basically, worshiping Baal was just the result of them making their own decisions. See, in a sense, Baal is not really the issue. It's they want to be reigning in their own heart. They don't want God telling them. They don't want God to reign in their hearts. They want to be their own God. They want to make their own decision. They want to worship what they want to do. All right, we're going to continue in chapter 9 next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.